Picture this. The BBC studios, a place so polite it practically smells of Earl Grey and suppressed emotions. The lighting is soft, the chairs are expensive, and Sir Keir Starmer is sitting there with his "I am definitely a serious person" face on. He expects a bit of light banter about the arts, maybe a softball question about his favorite film, and a quick photo op with a Hollywood icon to boost his approval ratings. Enter Tom Hardy. Not the red carpet designer suit Tom Hardy, but the "I grew up in East Sheen and I have absolutely no time for your nonsense" Tom Hardy. Within 10 minutes, the Prime Minister wasn't just outmatched, he looked like a secondary school student who had forgotten his homework, being lectured by a man who once played Bane in The Craze. It was brutal, it was unscripted, and it was the kind of television that makes spin doctors throw themselves off Westminster Bridge. Quick favor, if you are loving this breakdown of political carnage, hit that subscribe button right now. Over 92% of viewers haven't joined the crew yet. It is free, takes a second, and honestly, it means the world to us. Done it? Brilliant. Now, back to the absolute demolition of the Downing Street decorum. The ambush nobody saw coming. You see, the British establishment thrives on a very specific type of etiquette. It is a game of I pretend to answer and you pretend to be satisfied. But Tom Hardy does not play games, at least not the political kind. The BBC thought they were booking a harmless celebrity spot to discuss the future of British creative industries. What they got was a man who decided to treat Keir Starmer like a faulty script that needed a massive rewrite. It started innocently enough, but the moment Starmer tried to pivot into a rehearsed talking point about fiscal responsibility in the arts, Hardy's eyebrows did that thing they do. You know the one. The "I am about to dismantle your entire existence" twitch. The sheer audacity of the moment was breathtaking. While the Canadian political scene often feels like a polite disagreement over a hockey game, British politics is more like a pub brawl in a very expensive library. Hardy didn't just disagree with Starmer, he questioned the very foundation of his leadership style. He looked him dead in the eye and asked, "Do you actually believe what you are saying, or is that just the teleprompter talking?" You could almost hear the collective gasp from the production gallery. It was the digital equivalent of a grenade being tossed into a tea party. Why the internet is scrambling to hide the evidence. Now, here is where it gets truly spicy. If you try to find the full, unedited clip on the major platforms right now, you will find a lot of "this video is no longer available" notices. The Downing Street communications team is working harder than a barista on a Monday morning to scrub this from the record. Why? Because it breaks the illusion. We are told that politicians are the masters of the room, the ones with the answers. But when a man who spends his days pretending to be other people points out that the Prime Minister is the one putting on a performance, the whole house of cards starts to wobble. The scrubbing is essentially a digital panic attack. It is the political class trying to put the toothpaste back in the tube after it has already covered the bathroom floor. They are terrified because Hardy spoke the language of the people, not the language of the lobby. He used words like authenticity and backbone, concepts that are as foreign to modern politics as a warm day in a Canadian January. The more they try to hide it, the more people want to see it. It is the Streisand effect, but with more tattoos and a much better jawline. The middle management, Prime Minister versus the Alpha. The dynamic on that stage was a masterclass in body language. On one side, you had Keir Starmer, the embodiment of a human spreadsheet. He is methodical, he is cautious, and he is about as exciting as a lecture on tax law. On the other side, you had Hardy, a man who radiates a sort of unpredictable raw energy. When Starmer tried to use his prosecutor's voice to explain away the current economic stagnation, Hardy simply leaned back and laughed. It wasn't a mean laugh. It was the laugh of a man who has seen a better performance in a year 6 nativity play. This is the core of the humiliation. It wasn't about a specific policy. It was about the vibe. In the age of social media, the vibe is everything. Starmer looked like the manager of a failing department store trying to explain why the escalators are broken. Hardy looked like the guy who was going to fix them by kicking them until they worked. The contrast was devastating. For a prime minister who has struggled to define his brand, being told you lack a soul by the guy who played Mad Max is a PR disaster of biblical proportions. The economic reality check. Hardy style. Let us talk about the substance, or lack thereof. Hardy pivoted the conversation toward the cost of living and the struggle of the working class in the UK. He didn't use statistics or graphs provided by the Treasury. He talked about his mates, his family, and the people he sees on the street who can't afford to heat their homes, while the government argues over the definition of growth. He told Starmer, "You talk about numbers like they aren't people, but I see the people, and they don't look like your numbers." Starmer's response was a stuttering mess of, "We have a plan, and the previous government left us a black hole." Hardy's retort, "Then stop looking at the hole and start building a bridge. You've been in the job long enough to find the hammer. It was a line so sharp you could shave with it. The BBC host tried to intervene, sensing that their guest was about to cause a national emergency. But Hardy was just getting started. He dismantled the idea that slow and steady is what the country needs when the building is effectively on fire. Imagine trying to explain to a man who lives in the real world that the macroeconomic indicators are stabilizing while the price of butter has reached luxury item status. It was a collision of worlds, and Starmer was the one left in the wreckage. The global ripple effect, why Canada should care. You might be thinking, that is all well and good for the Brits, but what does this have to do with us in the Great White North? Everything. The UK is often the canary in the coal mine for Canadian politics. We share the same parliamentary DNA, the same penchant for bureaucratic red tape, and the same frustration with leaders who seem more interested in optics than outcomes. When a figure like Hardy stands up to a G7 leader and calls out the lack of genuine conviction, it resonates across the Commonwealth. We see the same thing happening here. We have leaders who are excellent at the photo op but struggle with the reality op. The Hardy moment is a symptom of a global fed-upness. People are tired of the polished, focus group responses. They want someone who sounds like they have actually lived a life outside of a political bubble. If it can happen on the BBC, it can happen on the CBC. Though let's be honest, our actors are far too polite to ever do something this cool. Think of it like this. If Keir Starmer is the generic brand cola of politics, reliable but flat, Tom Hardy just walked in with a bottle of high-proof whiskey and started pouring shots. The BBC's role, accidental revolutionaries. The most hilarious part of this entire saga is that the BBC inadvertently created the perfect environment for this takedown. By trying to be balanced and inclusive of celebrity voices, they invited a wolf into the sheep pen. They expected a fluff piece. They expected Tom to talk about his latest project and maybe mention how much he admires the resilience of the British public. Instead, they gave a platform to a man who has made a career out of playing rebels and outcasts. The presenters looked terrified. They were checking their earpieces every 5 seconds, likely hearing a producer screaming, "Abort! Abort! Ask him about his dog." But Hardy wouldn't let them off the hook. He stayed on target, focusing on the disconnect between the Westminster elite and the reality of the British streets. It was the most honest 15 minutes the BBC has broadcast in a decade, and they are absolutely horrified by it. It is like inviting a lion to a garden party and being surprised when it starts looking at the buffet as a snack and the guests as the main course. The fallout, a government in retreat. Following the broadcast, the reaction from the Labour Party was predictable. They released a statement saying the Prime Minister welcomes robust debate while simultaneously trying to get the clip removed for copyright reasons. It is the classic, "I'm not mad, I'm actually laughing" defense. But the damage is done. The memes are already everywhere. You cannot unsee the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom being told to man up by the guy who fought Batman. This isn't just a bad day at the office for Starmer. It's a defining moment. It has emboldened his critics and embarrassed his supporters. It showed that the tough Keir persona is paper-thin when challenged by someone who isn't intimidated by a title or a tailored suit. It's a reminder that in the court of public opinion, authenticity is the only currency that actually matters, and Starmer's account appears to be overdrawn. It is the political equivalent of being pantsed in the playground, except the playground is a national television studio and the bully is an international movie star. The anatomy of a humiliation. If we dissect why this specific interaction went viral, it comes down to the subversion of power. Usually, the Prime Minister is the one with the gravity, he is the sun, and everyone else is just a planet orbiting his immense ego and legislative agenda. But Hardy flipped the gravitational pull. He became the center of the room. When Starmer tried to interrupt with a, "Look, Tom," Hardy didn't back down. He leaned in. He used that gravelly, intimidating voice that has made him a legend in cinema and applied it to the most boring man in British public life. The result was pure, unadulterated comedy. It was like watching a tiger play with a ball of yarn. If the yarn was a knight of the realm and the tiger had a very high opinion of the working class. Starmer's attempts to regain control were like trying to stop a tidal wave with a damp tea towel. It was futile, it was embarrassing, and it was glorious to watch. A masterclass in intellectual brutality. Hardy didn't just use emotion. He used logic, but a type of logic that is rarely seen in the halls of power. He pointed out the circular reasoning that defines modern governance. You say you can't help because there is no money, but there is always money for a war or a bank bailout. Hardy noted, with a shrug that conveyed more wisdom than a 4-year PPE degree from Oxford. Starmer's eyes darted around the room, looking for a lifeline that wasn't there. The host tried to pivot to nicer topics like Hardy's jiu-jitsu training, but Tom turned that back on Starmer too. In the gym, if you don't perform, you get choked out. In your world, if you don't perform, you get a seat in the House of Lords. How does that work here? The silence that followed was so loud it could have been heard in Edinburgh. It was a direct hit to the solar plexus of the British class system. The scrubbing is the new PR. Let's go back to the internet's reaction. The fact that the clip is being scrubbed is the greatest endorsement of its power. If it were just a silly celebrity outburst, they would leave it up to make Hardy look bad. But because he made sense, because he spoke with a clarity that bypassed the usual political filters, it is dangerous. It represents a threat to the carefully curated image of the sensible government. In the digital age, censorship is the highest form of flattery. It means you said something that actually pierced the armor. The Labour Party's PR machine is in overdrive, trying to frame Hardy as out of touch or aggressive, but it isn't working. The public knows what they saw. They saw a man speaking truth to power, and they saw power flinching. Relatable analogies for the Canadian viewer. For our Canadian Hub audience, think of it this way. Imagine Justin Trudeau sitting down for a friendly chat with Ryan Reynolds about Deadpool, only for Ryan to suddenly start grilling him on the housing crisis and the carbon tax with the intensity of an interrogation. Now imagine Trudeau trying to use his dramatic pause voice to calm things down, only for Reynolds to laugh in his face and call him a theater kid with a trust fund. That is the level of seismic shift we are talking about here. It is the moment the celebrity becomes the voice of the disillusioned citizen and the politician realizes they have no real defense against raw, unfiltered common sense. It breaks the celebrity-politician symbiosis that usually keeps both parties safe and protected from the reality of the people they supposedly represent. The class war under the surface. There was a distinct element of class warfare in that BBC studio. Starmer, despite his working-class roots narrative, has become a creature of the system. He is the establishment personified. Hardy, despite his wealth and fame, has maintained a grit that feels authentic. When he speaks, he sounds like he knows what a pint costs at a local boozer. When Starmer speaks, he sounds like he's reading the minutes of a committee meeting. The confrontation was a battle between the elites and the street, and for 15 minutes, the street won. This is why the reaction has been so visceral. It tapped into a deep-seated resentment that transcends party lines. It wasn't about being left or right, it was about being in or out. And Starmer is definitely in, while Hardy, despite all his success, managed to represent the outs, the future of political interviews. This incident might just be the death knell for the safe celebrity politician interview. No politician in their right mind will want to sit down with someone who isn't on a short leash after this. We are likely going to see even more controlled environments, even more pre-vetted questions, and even less spontaneity. But that only makes the Hardy Starmer clip more valuable. It is a relic of a moment when the mask slipped. It serves as a blueprint for how to challenge those in power. Don't use their language, don't follow their rules, and don't be afraid to point out that the emperor has no clothes. And in Starmer's case, the emperor is wearing a very dull, gray suit that doesn't quite fit. The British media's existential crisis. The BBC is currently doing a lot of soul searching. Or at least, they are having a lot of meetings about soul searching. They pride themselves on being the national broadcaster, the impartial voice of the UK, but by allowing this interaction to happen, they showed how out of touch they are with the mood of the country. They thought Hardy would be a safe bet. They fundamentally misunderstood the man and the moment. Now, they are caught between a government that is furious with them and a public that is cheering them on for the first time in years. It is a classic BBC muddle, handled with the typical grace of a giraffe on ice skates. The international significance of the Hardy takedown. This isn't just about one interview, it's about the erosion of the political class's authority worldwide. From London to Ottawa, people are looking for leaders who are real. When they don't find them in the parliament, they look elsewhere. The fact that an actor has become the hero of the hour is a scathing indictment of our political landscape. It shows a vacuum of leadership that is being filled by anyone with the courage to speak plainly. Tom Hardy didn't set out to be a political revolutionary, but by simply refusing to play his assigned role, he became one. He showed that the most powerful weapon against a scripted politician is a man who refuses to follow the script. Why scrubbing the internet never works. In the year 2026, the idea that you can delete a viral video is laughable. Every time the government tries to take it down, 10 more people upload it to decentralized platforms. It's like a game of whack-a-mole, but the moles have high-speed internet and a grudge. The more the government tries to hide the Starmer humiliation, the more it cements the idea that they have something to hide. It confirms the public suspicion that they are being lied to, or at least that the truth is being managed. This digital trail is permanent, and no amount of copyright claims can erase the memory of the Prime Minister's face as he was being dismantled by the man who played Eddie Brock, the final nail in the PR coffin. The real tragedy for Starmer is that this will be his bacon sandwich moment, but on steroids. It is the image that will define him, not the policy wins, not the diplomatic summits, but the look of pure, unadulterated terror when Tom Hardy asked him if he'd ever actually seen a hospital waiting room in person. It is a moment of vulnerability that cannot be coached away. It is the crack in the foundation that eventually brings the whole building down. Keir Starmer might be the Prime Minister today, but in that studio, Tom Hardy was the king. Final thoughts, the actor as the truth teller. There is a profound irony in an actor being the one to demand honesty. We usually look to actors for escapism, for a way to forget our problems. But in this instance, Tom Hardy used his fame to force a moment of uncomfortable clarity. He didn't use a script, he used his gut. And that is why it hit so hard. It wasn't a political attack, it was a human one. As the UK grapples with this fallout, the rest of the world is watching and learning. We are learning that the elite are only elite as long as we agree to follow their rules. The moment someone stops playing along, the whole charade falls apart. Tom Hardy didn't just humiliate Keir Starmer. He reminded us all that we don't have to accept the business as usual narrative. Sometimes you just need to speak the truth, even if, especially if, it's live on the BBC. Good day to you all, and thank you for watching. Would you like me to dive deeper into how this might affect the next Commonwealth Summit, or perhaps analyze the specific policies Hardy was referencing? Just let me know.